The inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
They're doing it again. This time, it's the Olympic flag. The Union Jack now almost unrecognisable. Or is it? We'll debate, should our flag, should our symbols ever be changed? Pictures have emerged in the last hour of one of the Britons killed in the Israeli airstrike yesterday. On top of that, the Israeli ambassador summoned to the Foreign Office this afternoon. And the National Health Service, well, it's time we actually debated perhaps having a different funding model, because the current one just simply isn't working. But before all those debates, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight is that Lord Cameron has told his Israeli counterpart that major changes must be made to ensure the safety of aid workers in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has described the killing of 7 aid workers, including 3 British nationals, as tragic and unintended. They were delivering vital food supplies, travelling in 2 armoured cars, marked clearly with the logo World Central Kitchen. The aid group claims the attack was carried out despite them coordinating their movements with the Israeli military. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says the work of aid organisations must be protected.
They're doing fantastic work bringing alleviation to the suffering that many are experiencing in Gaza. They should be praised and commended for what they're doing. They need to be allowed to do that work unhindered, and it's incumbent on Israel to make sure that they can do that, and we're asking Israel to investigate what happened urgently, because clearly there are questions that need to be answered.
Rishi Sunak. Now, comments about Scotland's new hate crime law posted to social media by the author J.K. Rowling are not criminal. That's according to Police Scotland this afternoon. The new law sought to ban hatred against people on certain grounds, but the Harry Potter author said it risked silencing genuine debate on issues around gender, as well as ignoring the rights of women and girls. The Prime Minister backed those concerns, saying that people should not be criminalised for stating simple biology. The sports brand Adidas will redesign its German football shirts featuring the number 44 amid concerns over a resemblance to the Nazi SS symbol. The new kits were launched last month, ahead of Germany hosting the European Championship. But a historian flagged similarities to the SS logo, which was Nazi Germany's elite military guard under Hitler. The country's Football Association says it didn't spot the similarities when the design was initially approved, but it will now be changed. The government faced criticism today of its new plan to expand funded childcare for working parents on the first week of it being rolled out across England. Meeting parents in Hartlepool this morning, the Prime Minister rejected claims that nurseries can't cope with the increasing demand as a result of the new policy. Rishi Sunak said the package for support for families has been introduced in stages to give time for more places to be made available at nurseries. But the leader of the Lib Democrats, Ed Davey, says it shows the Conservatives are out of touch.
It's not just about registering, it's about whether the childcare is actually there. And in community after community, people are finding that there aren't the nursery places, there aren't the childminders, and parents are very disappointed, actually. They've been promised help by the Conservatives, but childcare is in chaos under the Conservatives, and it needs dramatic reform.
So, Ed Davey. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. Well, I thought it was an absolutely knockout front page of The Sun that went online last night and was on display all over the country today. Union joke, and there is. Well, you can just about make out that it's the Union flag, better known perhaps as the Union Jack, but they've decided to add pink and all sorts of colours to it, and that is on sale for fans going to the Olympics in France this year to buy and to wear, which led to a great big panic. What on earth would be on the shirts, shorts and kit of the athletes? Well, a statement did come out mid-morning from the British Olympic Association, which said all Team GB athletes will wear the Union Jack as normal in Paris. However, Team GB kit itself is expected to include different shades of blue or red as in previous years. Well, I'm sorry, I don't really buy that. We'll have to see how the kit turns out. But of course, this follows hard on the heels of a story we did just 10 days ago, which was that for the European Football Championships coming up in Germany in June, that the Cross of St George, which will appear on the back of players' shirts, is unrecognisable in terms of colours to the Cross of St George. So should, folks, our flag ever be changed? Well, Peter Shilton said, is nothing sacred anymore? I have to say, I think this is really all quite deliberate, an attempt that goes right through much of civil society, right through much of our education system. They want us to basically be ashamed of who we are as people, not proud. I am dead against it. Give me your thoughts, please, on this. Farage at gbnews.com. Now, we sent Adam Cherry out to Wembley today to ask some members of the public how they felt about this.
Latest episode of Companies Fixing Things That Weren't Broken. We're going to be asking the people of London what they think of the changing colours of the Team GB Olympic logo. Take a look at this.
The blue, the red and the white, it's perfect. I feel like, you know, it shouldn't be that controversial, but, you know, it's iconic. I feel like the colours are iconic. Everyone's known London for being, you know, red, white and blue.
I feel like it doesn't really represent England like that. The colours of the colours are kind of random.
I think it's very colourful. It's very pinkish and quite unicornish kind of thing, yeah.
A bit too unicornish for Team GB.
A little bit.
Do you think it was right to change the colour scheme from the original to whatever that is?
I think it's just a bit more different, really, and make all the other countries kind of look at us and be like, wow.
It doesn't really matter as long as Team GB do well at the Olympics.
Disgusting. Well, we're British. Their colours are not pink and purple and...
Like, you know, some patterns on there, it's all going crazy.
That's not our flag. That don't represent me.
Well, joining me in the studio to discuss this is Henry Smith MP, Conservative Member of Parliament for Crawley and Chair of the Flags and Heraldry All-Party Parliamentary Group, and Graham Bartram, Chief Vexillologist, we're going to go into that in a bit more detail in a moment, from the Flag Institute, and Lisa Mason, British Olympian gymnast. Henry, you know, this follows so quickly on from the Football Association, I mean, almost across St George disappearing from the England football kit. And I mean, to be fair, we have had a clarifying statement, but still online you can buy, you know, supporting kit with that flag on. Could this be a cynical attempt by marketing companies to get some publicity, or is it all a deliberate attempt to erode identity?
Well, I think it's probably both. We see this constant erosion of British identity, how we're supposed to be made to feel ashamed of our heritage. Quite the opposite, I would argue, should be the case. You know, people died for freedom under the Union flag, the Union Jack, and I think it should be respected. And I'm fed up with this sort of constant sort of erosion of respect for our national symbols, and I suspect that this is something deliberate. Team GB have probably, in a panic, just pulled it back to say that the Union Jack will be properly displayed on kit.
I think the hue and cry did, without a doubt, you know, make them respond fairly quickly, which the FA, incidentally, have not done. And I'd rather hope that Gareth Southgate, the England manager, would have spoken out, but given that he had us taking the knee after everybody else, maybe that was a bit of a vain hope. But Graham, explain to me, vexillologist.
It just means somebody who works with flags.
Simple as that.
Latin for flag is vexillum.
Perfect.
We've learned something. We've learned half Latin, half Greek.
Only Jacob Rees-Mogg here would have known that, his Latin being far better than mine. How is this allowed to happen? I mean, these are important national symbols. I think they're important to supporters. I suspect, and I'm going to come to Lisa in a moment, they're important to competitors as well. How is this allowed to happen? Because I'm told that in other countries, it would actually be illegal.
Yeah, well, in this country, we don't really have any modern laws, at least in England, about flags, etc. There isn't even a law that says that the national flag is the Union flag.
Really?
There are clauses of treaties that, if you read them carefully, you could interpret them to mean that. But the flag of the United Kingdom is the Union flag. Nope, don't have that. We don't have what you might call a national symbols officer. A national symbols officer who could expect to be consulted about things like changing the flag for use at the Olympics, and basically sort of say no.
And this could be a Home Office minister could have this added to their brief.
It could, yes.
You wouldn't need to spend any money on it, would you?
It's not as if you're going to require a department of 1,000 people.
No.
You're talking about just adding it as a responsibility to one minister that you are the national symbols officer, or one of your underlings is a national symbols officer, and you are the government's person for dealing with this.
And why do you think this is happening?
One of the problems is, in some ways, we're such an old country. We have a sort of confidence in government that we don't need to worry about these things because we are Britain. We are, and it's only when stuff like this happens that you go, actually, maybe we do need to worry about it.
Well, clearly, after the last couple of weeks, we do.
And, I mean, before that, there was that period when people like the National Front basically grabbed the national flag and made it theirs and said, pretty well, nobody else can use it.
But we've reclaimed that, haven't we? We're well past all of that.
We have.
We're well past all of that.
And things like the Euro 96, when the England flag started being used again. We've got past that, but it's a constant battle, and you need somebody to fight it.
Interesting.
And it's no good
now,
just
Lisa,
expecting it.
as a competitor, I mean, this is quite important, isn't it? The symbolism on your kit.
Absolutely. What I was saying earlier on is, from my, knowledge of competing for Great Britain, especially with the Olympic kit, there's alterations of the flag constantly. I know it's happened throughout the football shirts. However, there is always a little flag, which is your flag, and it's either on the arm, or it's down here somewhere, but that's always there. Now, me waking up and seeing the news about the GB kit, for me, I thought that was just, the design of the T-shirt. I didn't realise it was something they were coming out to try and change. And you imagine if this was America. What would happen in America if they decided to put pink in their flag instead of red? There'd be an uproar. And so why are we the only country that's doing it? It's insane.
And as a competitor, how does it feel to put that kit on?
I mean, for me, the big part, and I think a lot of Olympians can say this, one of the best part about being an Olympian is when you go for kit day and you're there and you've got 2 huge suitcases full of, Team GB only competitors' kit that you get to wear because it's got the GB flag on it. It makes you feel...
Does it mean something?
It absolutely. When you win medals, the pride you feel for seeing your flag go up. Imagine standing there and you're seeing pink, lilac, or something else.
Or in the case of the football team, I've no idea what mixture of colours, sort of orange, I think it is, or something. Yeah. And the fans must feel the same way too, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, with this wokeness and people trying to, make things a little bit more modern, I guess is the word to say.
For the sake of what?
Oh, I don't know. Moving forward, not being stuck in the old ages. I don't know. But I think there will be people that embrace, and I think unless you are like a proper, how can I say it? Somebody that is very patriotic or someone that's represented their country, I think you don't feel it as much, I think. And I think it's easy for people where it doesn't really, I don't want to say affect you because I don't mean it in that manner, but, when something's important to you, you fight for it more. Same with anything that happens in the world. If it affects you, you fight for it, don't you?
I think Graham's point is we've taken it for granted.
Yeah.
I think that's really the point you were making earlier. Henry, you've got this all-party parliamentary group on these things, and I think Graham's point about having somebody who was an officer for this, and it could, I think, be a junior Home Office minister, has it added to the brief. Obviously, Parliament's in recess, but I mean, I really do think that you guys ought to be standing up and doing something about this.
Well, no, I agree, and I think Graham's idea is something we've discussed in the past.
Yeah.
Is very important. As I say, it wouldn't cost any more. It would just fix a point of responsibility in government to make sure that our national symbols are protected. So many of our symbols, whether it be people climbing on statues or tugging at the Union Jack on the cenotaph during protests disgracefully, so many of our symbols are now under actual deliberate attack by those who are interested in pursuing the culture wars, trying to cancel what it is to be British and all of the great things that we have done. And one of the things I reflect on is that actually the Union Jack is a very trendy, popular symbol around the world. You see the Union Jack everywhere. It's probably one of the most recognisable flags
I've seen it on T-shirts in New York, and I mean, there's nothing stuffy or bad about it. It actually represents, I think, quite good values. I wonder, though, Lisa, I do wonder about this point that a lot of younger people have had the country talked down to, you know, by school teachers, by very left-wing university professors. It's almost as if we're the only country that ever was involved with slavery. We've invented climate change. There is a lot of negativity, isn't there, pushed into young people?
I think so. I think for a lot of it, where we are so aware of everything that's going in and out of the news nowadays, it's easy to create a narrative, and, you know, interpretation is everything. And I think that a lot of the younger generation are led massively on their feelings, and unfortunately, like I said, it's down to interpretation of what they take away from it. And there are a lot of bad things that has happened in our history as well as the rest of the world.
Very good things too.
Yeah, exactly. There's very good things as well. But I think especially over the whole COVID time, where everyone was really homed in on what we'd done as a country and, you know, protests and everything that happened, I think it's made people go, yeah, it's not great. And like you said earlier on, there's very much like a council culture for, you know, being British, if you will.
Well, we're going to try and fight for that. A national symbols officer, that is clearly what we need. We cannot take our national symbols for granted. Thank you, all of you, for contributing to this debate. And yeah, it does really matter. Now, in the last hour or so, we've seen photographs and got the name of one of the 3 Brits that were killed, aid workers that were killed in Gaza yesterday. It's leading to the Israeli ambassador being called in to the Foreign Office. We will speak to Mark White, our Home Affairs editor. We will also speak to a spokesman from the Israeli government. All of that in a couple of minutes.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
So many of you have been getting in touch over the WASPy issue. And actually, I just want to bring forward a view from Tony, who has written in to say something that we haven't included in this conversation so far. Tony says, it was well publicised. Stop all the crying, his words. He says the Pensions Act 1995 provided for this change. It was marginally sped up in 2010, but the fundamental issue, the WASPy issue, didn't come about in 2010 or 2011. It came about in 1995.
Yeah, people know that the legislation was earlier, but the problem was a lot of women weren't told.
Beverly, who's a WASPy woman, has written in saying, were the WASPy women living under a stone? I am one of the women who was affected by this change. My peers and I were fully aware of the changes. It was widely discussed on TV, radio and in the newspapers as soon as the decision was made. We weren't happy at the time, but we recognised that it was fair. It's wrong to spend billions in this way. I'd rather the post office people who suffered so much were reimbursed.
Well, I think for the social contract to work and for our society to be cohesive and harmonious, if that's possible, you can't just have people who don't work or don't have much receive all the benefit.
Well, now you're arguing against people. You're saying that people should have, to some extent, have looked in 1995 when the change happened. But fundamentally, it's not just WASPy women who've been screwed over since the financial crisis. We have a 70-year high tax burden. Someone earning £60,000 this year will pay more tax than someone earning £60,000 has ever had to pay before.
But Tom, you do realise this isn't the first time that we've had hugely high tax rates on income.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, should our flag ever be changed? Some of your feedback. Steve says, this disgrace is just another reflection of the total desecration of our national pride. Jackie says, this is an attempt to go woke yet again. I just hope go woke, go broke proves correct and nobody buys the shirts. And another says, how dare they change our flag? No other country in the world would dare do that. And you know what? I think that is absolutely right. As Lisa said a moment ago, imagine the American flag being changed. Just think what the reaction would be. Now, it has been a very dramatic diplomatic afternoon following an airstrike that took place in Gaza yesterday. 7 aid workers killed, 3 of them, we understand, British, and quite a strong diplomatic response this afternoon from our Foreign Office. GB News' Home Affairs and Security Editor Mark White joins me down the line to give us a briefing.
Well, I think what the Israeli government has said is that, it's deeply apologetic for what has happened. They've described this as an unintended missile strike. They're deeply remorseful and clearly in a very difficult position because they have a very good relationship with this particular charity, the World Central Kitchen, who've been working in Gaza for a number of months now, doing vital work there on the humanitarian front. This incident happened last night when a convoy of vehicles from the WCK was leaving and heading down the coastal highway when it was struck by missiles. 7 aid workers killed. We thought initially that there was one British national caught up in this, but as the day progressed, today we got the confirmation that 3 British nationals have been killed in this incident, including, it's being widely reported now, James Henderson, a former Royal Marine, someone who had only been working for the charity out there in Gaza a number of weeks, someone described as compassionate, very professional, who would have been alive to all of the threats out there and who would, I have no doubt, been liaising with the Israeli military, like the charity says they were doing every day, to try to ensure that they were in these deconflicted areas and to try to reduce the possibility of a terrible incident like this unfolding. And one of the main reasons I think this will be particularly difficult and awkward for the Israeli government is because of the relationship with this and other charities who the Israelis have been encouraging to come in to help with the aid effort in Gaza, because the relationship with the UN agency has completely broken down. Israel has accused UNRWA of employing some 2,000 members of Hamas for this organisation, also for employing people who were directly involved in those atrocities on the 7th of October. Israel would like to see the back of UNRWA in Gaza. But in the meantime, they've been encouraging other groups like the WCK to come in there and do what they can to help the people of Gaza. So now it's involved, understandably, in urgent talks with these charities to try to come up with a more foolproof way of ensuring that there can be no repetition of the horrific events of last night.
Mark White, thank you very much indeed for that. And I'm joined down the line from Israel by Avi Hyman, who's acting as a spokesman for the Israeli government. Avi, thank you for joining me this evening. So your ambassador in London, Zippy Hotovely, has been called in to meet Foreign Office Minister Andrew Mitchell today. What I don't quite understand is how a vehicle that was so clearly marked was targeted, or was this just a horrible accident?
Nigel, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for highlighting the story. It would appear, a terrible, terrible accident. This was an incredible organization. You know, aid workers like these in conflicts like this are often the unsung heroes. They were going to give food and aid to people that genuinely need it at a time when we're fighting to get aid into Gaza and not having it stolen by Hamas, who are taking it into their underground compounds and hogging the food and aid. So our heart goes out to the families of the victims, and we're going to thoroughly investigate it. It's going to be a transparent investigation, a professional investigation, and we hope, ultimately we hope that we'll find out that it actually wasn't us, and maybe there was some other explanation, because it's such a terrible situation. But ultimately we will get to the bottom of this and ensure that it doesn't happen again. You have a situation in Gaza where,
No, okay. And, you know, for your ambassador to be called in to the Foreign Office does reflect, I think you'll agree, a quite significant shift in position in terms of British foreign policy and indeed American foreign policy since October the 7th. And I completely understand your position that if Hamas is allowed to be unscathed after October the 7th, there was nothing to stop them simply doing it again, and perhaps even on a bigger scale. But the sheer number of civilian casualties are beginning to leave Israel very, very isolated.
Nigel, I'm not going to wade into British politics. You've made your name on that. I'll leave that to you. What I can say is that Israel is up against a brutal, brutal enemy that has said that given the chance, they will do October 7th again and again and again. We can't allow that to happen. So we need to plow on with our mission to destroy Hamas, to bring home the 134 hostages, and to ensure that Gaza doesn't become a threat to us again. Now, we believe that our allies, be it Great Britain, be it the United States, will stand shoulder to shoulder, not just because of what I've explained, but because it's an issue of values. It's an issue of the same enemy. The people that perpetrated October 7th are the same ideology that perpetrated the 7th of the 7th. We first saw Hamas became famous on the world stage by blowing up, doing suicide bombings on buses, blowing up buses. We all remember the scenes of the blown up double-decker in London. To quote the former chief rabbi of England, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, what starts with the Jews rarely ends with the Jews. So we're in the same battlefield. This is your war, and we need to win this war because our enemies all around are watching.
Yes, but the point I'm making, and final point, but most important point, is people are seeing, and, you know, numbers are disputed, obviously, they always are in these situations, but people are seeing a very large civilian death toll. And that's the worry. And that is what is turning people, if not against Israel, certainly to a more neutral position.
So allow me to push back on that, because, yes, that's definitely a narrative that's being pushed, and it's a Hamas narrative, because the more people think that civilian casualties are skyrocketing, the more chance Hamas has to stop the war because of international pressure and to stay in power. So that's Hamas's strategy, to increase civilian casualties on both sides. Now, what the IDF is doing, and this has been said by leading military experts in British experts, leading American experts, is the IDF is operating in a way to absolutely minimize civilian casualty in a way that no other army has done in the history of modern warfare. I believe in generations to come, they'll be learning about the battles that we're currently fighting in Sandhurst and in West Point, in military schools, as the gold standard for urban warfare. I don't think there's ever been a scenario where a terrorist organization has set themselves up deep within a civilian population, under a civilian population, created a network of terror tunnels twice the size of the London Underground to attack us. This is unprecedented, and we're doing our very best, and we're winning, and we will have total victory.
Well, thank you for making those points, because they're not being heard enough on British media. Avi Hyman, thank you very much indeed. OK, in a moment, we're going to have a proper, grown-up debate about the National Health Service. Yes, once said to be the nearest thing we had to a national religion. But I think there are many of you now out there ready to think, are there different ways we could run it and fund it?
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Yes, there will be some drier, brighter weather around across southern parts tomorrow, but first there's quite a bit of rain to come, driven by an area of low pressure and an associated frontal system that's sweeping up from the southwest, bringing outbreaks of rain for many, though initially tonight there will be some dry weather across parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England, though the outbreaks of rain arriving here, and across eastern parts of Scotland some persistent rain could actually bring some hill snow over the highest ground. Across the far northwest of Scotland there may be a touch of frost first thing tomorrow morning, otherwise Wednesday gets off to a mild, cloudy and rather damp start for many. Outbreaks of rain which could turn heavy and persistent across parts of Northern Ireland and southern Scotland through the morning. They will continue across many northern areas into the afternoon, though breaking up a little bit. Across more central and southern parts of England and Wales, turning drier, a few showers but also some decent bright sunny spells in which it should feel relatively warm with highs around 16 Celsius, but markedly colder than this further north. More unsettled weather to come as we go through Thursday. Watch out for some heavy outbreaks of rain sweeping their way from west to east across southern parts of England, with further outbreaks of rain further north too, and more persistent rain pushing in from the southwest later on. And the unsettled theme continues as we head towards the weekend. Could turn very windy in fact by Saturday, but temperatures rising, likely to get to 20 Celsius. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs Live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I did say on my first show on GB News, 21st of July 2021, that confidence in the National Health Service would fall. Well, it's fallen off a cliff. It's down from 70% in 2010 to 24% today, and falling rapidly. Having any alternative debate has been very, very difficult. I remember talking to Nick Robinson on the Today programme 10 years ago, asking whether our funding model actually worked. And to read the British press the next day. I mean, you would have thought that I was advocating that the poor just died in the gutters, but now we can actually begin to have that grown-up debate. And I'm joined by James Bartholomew, journalist and author of The Welfare State We're In. And
so it's confusing. It's also the welfare of nations.
Yeah, but it is the welfare state we're in as well, which matters.
This is the other one.
This is the other one. That's the welfare state we're in. We've got both books here. Now, James, you have been looking at benefit systems. You've been looking at public funding for a very, very long time. You wrote a really interesting piece today in the Telegraph talking about 1948, because we're all brought up to believe that before 1948, unless you were very rich, there was no healthcare provision in this country whatsoever. And indeed, in 2020, Boris Johnson was telling us that the National Health Service is the envy of the world. So what really happened in 1948?
Well, it certainly isn't the envy of the world and hasn't been for a very, very long time. The health service before 1948 was extremely substantial. Every single major hospital that you know of and one has heard of was created prior to 1948, prior to the National Health Service. I've seen recent figures that there were 2,600 hospitals then, and there are now less than half that number. The NHS has not created hospitals, it has closed them. St George's in Tooting, for example, used to consist of 10 hospitals. They've been merged to create one. And in fact, you can see St George's not far from here, the original one in Hyde Park Corner. It's now a hotel. The Guy's was created, long ago.
Yeah, centuries ago.
St Bart's was created in the 12th century. So was St Thomas's. Royal Free Hospital was created in the 19th century. Addenbrooke's, Radcliffe, Bristol Infirmary, over and over again. All these major hospitals.
How did people get healthcare then?
Well, there was this, and this is what the Labour Party didn't like. There was a variety of sources. Basically, in hospitals, there were two different kinds. There was the voluntary hospitals, which is a phrase really meaning a charitable hospitals.
Yep.
And then, and which, if necessary, you could be treated for free. And there were consultants who gave their time for free. It's hard to imagine now. They gave their time for free for patients in those hospitals. And there were also municipal hospitals, ones that were run by local authorities, that were the development of the original poorhouse in the 19th century. And they developed to become more and more hospitals because the poorhouses were closed and the hospital part of them remained. And they looked after, on the whole, people who had needed long-term care. Remember, at that time, there was a lot of demand for health care because of tuberculosis had not been wiped out. So people were in for weeks and weeks in hospitals.
I mean, now we have a system where NHS England has a central budget of £168 billion this year. We have, over the last few years, put in more and more money. Gone from 7% of GDP to 10% of GDP. We've now got over 2 million staff in total, yet fewer and fewer of us are getting treated. What should we do in terms of structure?
Well, I mean, I think we should have to move to a social insurance system.
Yeah.
It's the one which is the most common system in the world. It's used across Europe. It's used also varieties of it in Singapore and elsewhere. It's not perfect. No system of healthcare is perfect.
No.
But the results of a typical European system are dramatically better.
Well, this is interesting. Now, Melanie Phillips joins me down the line from Israel. And Melanie, you've been talking about this as well. It's as if the only options that we have open to us are our form of direct taxation and all this money going to NHS England, or the American system, which is wildly expensive. And James has just touched on this European social insurance. And it's almost like this has been a sort of a secret that we weren't allowed to debate in public. Explain to the audience, please, how this system actually works.
Yes, it is very odd that it's not been discussed. Basically, the system, which takes different forms in different countries, but there are certain common features. And the main common feature is that every individual is required by law to pay into a health insurance provider. And that provider is usually in competition with other providers. As a result, the costs of funding the people who can't pay at all or can't pay very much are borne by people who can pay more. In other words, the costs are pooled. And the advantage is there are certain disadvantages to it. I think that they're supposed to have higher transaction costs and higher administrative costs than the health service model. That's what I read. But the advantages are that the standard of even basic care is very much higher than in the health service. You get seen much faster. The quality of the care is much higher. The quality of the equipment is much higher because more money is going in. Why is more money going in? Because people actually are prepared to pay more in terms of the contribution they make. Because unlike paying your taxes, of which part goes to the health service, but you don't know how much, this is very transparent. You can see what you are paying for, and you can take your money away. And healthcare providers, because they are sensitive to the patient, to the person who is buying their health insurance, there is an incentive to provide the services, guess what, that people actually want and need. And that's the crucial thing. It gives people, it gives patients and potential patients leverage. It puts control in their hands, and the whole standard is raised immediately.
This is privatisation, Melanie. People will throw their hands up in horror.
No, it's not privatization. Privatization is what's been tried in various ways over the past few years to privatize bits of the health service. And by privatization, what I understand that to mean is that you farm it out to independent private companies who provide your services. This is not privatization. This is more kind of mutualization, that you pool everyone's contributions. And this provides two things which I think are crucial. People love the health service for various reasons. One reason they love it is because they very much believe that poor people should not be discriminated against, that everybody should have equal access to the best health care. And I would agree with that. And that's very important. But also the health service stands for a Britain which people fear has gone or is going, a Britain in which people are compassionate to each other, put other people first, in which people share in a kind of sense of common shared endeavor, and institutions in which you can share a sense of pride. Now, I think all those things are things that the health service purports to embody, but is actually failing in. It seems to me that social insurance schemes do provide those things.
Melanie Phillips, absolutely fascinating. Thank you for joining me. Last quick thought, James. We do hear the Labour Party talking about radical change to the National Health Service. They look like they may form the next government. Do you believe it?
No, I don't. And the reason I don't is because there's such a long history in the NHS of politicians saying, if I do this, then it'll be better. If I do, and this is how they get elected. I mean, going back all the way to the 1970s when Keith Joseph said, management consultants will make it more logical and more managerial. It's been every election, the opposition will always say, I've got something that's going to make it work. And it never does.
James, thank you. Lots of reading for me to do. A couple of quick thoughts, if I can. Today in Australia, a mass campaign to use ATMs to show people that cash still matters. I thoroughly approve of that. Number 10 asked why boat crossings are up 43%. Now say it's the weather. When they totally denied it was the weather, was the numbers were down at the end of last year. Nothing working there. And a final thought, Cheryl Jacobs, Brexiteer in Telegraph today, said after she'd been to meet the fishermen at Brixham, she wondered whether perhaps this country had an allergy to freedom and maybe we should rejoin the European Union. No, Cheryl, we're out. We just need a government that actually bloomin' believes it. And I can tell you from personal experience that for the British fishing industry, particularly the smaller, under 10 metre inshore fleet, things are now far worse, far more bureaucratic than they were before Brexit. And that is our fault, but it's for us to sort out. In a moment, let's talk about the British Museum, with George Osborne there as an important chairman of it. It seems they want to give away virtually every treasure they've got. Does that make any sense at all?
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
This story caught my eye. Lloyds Bank, right, they own the insurance company Scottish Widows. They have now issued some kind of suggested guidance about which word to try and avoid upsetting people or perhaps be as inclusive as possibly can be. One of these words is widows, which really caught my eye because of the amount of stupidity. If you own a brand literally called Scottish Widows, you can't then be saying that the word widows is triggering and offensive. Anyway, because it is so ludicrous, I need to move over from that part because I want to talk about the broader issue. So many organisations, they have what they call ESG. I'm going to bring a graphic up on the screen in case you're not familiar with what this is. But it's a sense of kind of government, and I would say it's almost like a spine. It underpins so much of what business does today. It stands for environmental, social and governance. And it's around things like how does a business perform when it comes to their environmental impact? How diverse are their employees? How diverse is their board? And so on and so forth. Do you think ESG is a force for good and much needed within business or not, Ben?
It is the introduction of systemic institutionalised prejudice in the United Kingdom, which is going to damage dreadfully our economy, but also our culture, our cohesion as a society, and it's undermining, again, coming back to it, the nation-state that is the United Kingdom. ESG has to be ditched.
Strong words. Judita, do you agree with him?
I don't agree, because I think that with ESG, when you have them, what you're having an increase in is specialists in ESG being introduced into companies to kind of imbricate it into how the company functions. If you're moving in a direction of making your company's functionality be optimized in a way that is inclusive of anyone from any background who has the qualifications to occupy that position, that is a good thing.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, I don't know. Ever since George Osborne turned up at the British Museum, and there he is, he's chairman of the museum's board of trustees, things have been stolen from the museum, objects stolen in their thousands, and those they've got left, they seem to want to give away, whether it's to Egypt or to Ghana or to Greece. I honestly don't know what is really going on or whether it makes any sense at all. I'm joined by Roger Michael, Executive Director of the Institute for Digital Archaeology, and he joins me from the Columbia School of Journalism in New York. Roger, you know, we've had this argument over the Elgin marbles that seems to go on decade after decade, but now from what we hear, I mean, there are government after government in negotiations with the British Museum for artefacts to be handed back. I mean, if we keep giving things away or having them stolen, is there really any point in the British Museum?
Well, Nigel, you're not going to run out of artifacts anytime soon. There are millions and millions of objects that have never even been displayed at the British Museum. And frankly, it's not a question of giving these things away. You need to get rid of these things. These things are tying you down. This is the, as an anti-Brexiteer, you must understand that this embrace of Europe that's represented by this trophy house that's the British Museum is not good for the British psyche. It's not good for the British people. It's not good for anybody. You go into the Smithsonian, you see Marilyn Monroe's dress, you see the Spirit of St. Louis, you see the lunar module that took Americans to the moon. It's a place we are proud to be, and it displays the triumphs of our culture. You need to do just the same. Last year, when they did that horrible Stonehenge exhibition at the British Museum, all they wanted to do was put it in a European context. I mean, this is the quintessential British artifact, and even that had to be Europeanized. I mean, come on, get rid of this stuff, move on. You've got a great culture, celebrate.
Very interesting points you're making here. And because the other point you make, you know, if they really have got millions of artefacts and they're not on display, they might be better off. Actually, you're making a good point. They might be better off elsewhere where people can actually see them.
Oh, for God's sake, it's time for a spring cleaning over there. They literally they're able to show 1% of 1% of the objects they've got. Every closet, every nook and cranny is stuffed with stuff they can't even display. Get some things out there that are fascinating, that are part of Mr. Sloane's bequest to the British Museum. He gave those things in good faith. For God's sake, show them to people.
But had the Elgin marbles stayed in Greece, they probably would have been destroyed. So you could argue historically that the British Museum has done quite a good job as a custodian.
Oh, gosh, come on. Look at the Acropolis Museum. Beautiful space for exhibiting these things. Lots of things that managed to survive the Turkish occupation. These things would have been in as good nick as the things they've got in the Acropolis Museum today. The place that's in trouble is, of course, Mr. Osborne's British Museum. You go over there, they need to open the doors of the Duveen Gallery to let air in, because it's so goddamn humid in the Duveen Gallery these days. The water's coming in through the ceiling. Look, they've scrubbed these things with acid. They've scrubbed them with metal brushes. To say that the British are being good stewards of these objects is outrageous, really.
Well, what an absolutely fascinating point of view. Roger Michael, thank you very much indeed. And Jacob, I know this is something you feel quite strongly about, the British Museum, the artefacts. He makes the point there are millions of objects in the British Museum. So is that just a terrible waste?
Well, some of them are the most exciting objects we're talking about, aren't they? The Rosetta Stone is so important and interesting. Of course we should keep it. It's fundamental to how we began to understand Egypt in actually the success against Napoleon. It was, of course, his troops who found it first. And there is an issue that museums are magpie-like. They want to get everything.
And they get bequests.
And they get bequests, and they end up with too much. But we're talking here about some of the best things, and some of the things we're talking about, we lose the historic context. That there was very interesting discussion about, actually it was the V&A sending back some royal regalia. Turned out that royal regalia had been won by the British when fighting against the slave trade from a slave trading nation. We defeated them, and we took the regalia. Well, actually, isn't that a good thing to do when we were defeating the slave trade? So I think we should be more proud of our history. Of course we made mistakes, but actually the history of the United Kingdom is pretty impressive.
But this idea of millions of objects being in store cupboards, in warehouses, that's pretty pointless, isn't it?
Oh, I agree. I think museums buy too much, and I'd rather things be in private ownership. But I'd rather then they sold them rather than just gave them to people randomly.
Or have them stolen.
Or have them stolen. And not the Elgin marbles, which are absolutely key to the collection, and the Rosetta Stone. But yes, all those things stuffed away in drawers that they were given by great-aunt Annie 150 years ago, they ought probably to be owned by individuals who would enjoy them and display them better.
Or other provincial museums, or wherever it may be.
But the other provincial museums almost certainly have too much as well. I think this is a problem.
How interesting.
I prefer private ownership, because I think that people who own something take better care of it than collectivisation, as a general rule. And, you know, if something's pinched from your house, you notice.
Well, do you know, Jacob, I have this feeling about medals. I collect military medals. And people say, oh, no, they should all be in a museum. But if it's row after row after row of medals, perhaps the visitor gives them a fairly cursory glance, because kind of you've seen a couple of ECs, well, you don't need to see any more. And I think when they're in private ownership, every time they go up for auction, the stories behind the men that won these awards and how they did it comes up for debate once again. So I think there is a great argument in a market in these things.
I completely agree with you. They are better remembered in that sense, and the history around them. And if you're anything like me, I collect random curios, and then I bore my guests with them by making them look at them and talking to them about them.
Do you ever sell stuff?
No.
No.
No. I'm not proud of magpie as well.
I think we've exposed Jacob the magpie, criticising the magpies at the British Museum.
Mainly because I want to buy some of these.
Well, for me, it's a bit of an anniversary today because it was on the 2nd of April in 2014 when the BBC did a very big live debate on our membership of the European Union. It was the first time they'd done it for 40 years, and it was me up against the Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, with David Dimbleby in the chair. And I have to say, it's the 10th anniversary, and it was a very, very special moment for me, and I think perhaps did quite a lot of good to the whole campaign that led in the end to a referendum and to Brexit. So I'm going out after this show to have a little drink to celebrate that. Tomorrow, I have a significant birthday. Yep, I'm going to be 60 years young tomorrow, which is something to celebrate because I've had a few ups and downs and a few medical issues and a few accidents over my life. So you will forgive me if I'm not with you tomorrow evening. Tom Harwood will be standing in for me. I will be back with you on Thursday, though. But before that, Jacob, what's coming up on the show tonight?
Well, we're going to be talking about Thames Water and why it should just go bankrupt. That capitalism...
Do you mean capitalism?
Yes.
Free markets?
Yeah. Look, they went in for sophisticated financial engineering that didn't work. They paid their shareholders a lot of money. They overgeared. They're now bust. Let them go bust. The assets are still there. The water company can carry on in a new way with new owners. We can still get water. The capital invested is lower, and therefore their prices could actually fall. So no bailout, no regulatory support,
I have to say,
just free markets.
I rather agree with that. I think it would work beautifully. Now, let's have a look for my birthday what the April showers will be like tomorrow.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Yes, there will be some drier, brighter weather around across southern parts tomorrow, but first there's quite a bit of rain to come, driven by an area of low pressure and an associated frontal system that's sweeping up from the southwest, bringing outbreaks of rain for many, though initially tonight there will be some dry weather across parts of Northern Ireland and Northern England, though the outbreaks of rain arriving here, and across eastern parts of Scotland some persistent rain could actually bring some hill snow over the highest ground. Across the far northwest of Scotland there may be a touch of frost first thing tomorrow morning, otherwise Wednesday gets off to a mild, cloudy and rather damp start for many. Outbreaks of rain which could turn heavy and persistent across parts of Northern Ireland and southern Scotland through the morning. They will continue across many northern areas into the afternoon, though breaking up a little bit. Across more central and southern parts of England and Wales, turning drier, a few showers but also some decent bright sunny spells in which it should feel relatively warm with highs around 16 Celsius but markedly colder than this further north. More unsettled weather to come as we go through Thursday. Watch out for some heavy outbreaks of rain sweeping their way from west to east across southern parts of England, with further outbreaks of rain further north too, and more persistent rain pushing in from the southwest later on. And the unsettled theme continues as we head towards the weekend. Could turn very windy in fact by Saturday, but temperatures rising, likely to get to 20 Celsius. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free